Good afternoon, everyone. So, I said I'm an Meester, and I'm very happy to present to you the PROV4ITDATA project. I don't think I need to convince anyone about the need for control of personal data. That's why we're all here. And within the PROV4ITDATA project, we have been looking into the technical problems that get us from the situation that you have right now into this kind of vision of having full control over your own personal data. So before we can start, let's first see what are the problems with personal data currently. Well, the big problem is that it's scattered across all the different service providers that you have. You can have your address book in Facebook, in an address book in LinkedIn, and each service provider has a different take on what an address book should be. And that's perfectly fine. That's why there are different applications. However, that also makes it very hard to put the data together. They're all structured heterogeneously in very different ways. And this contributes to vendor locking. Your data only works within the specific apps they're in. And then there is the solid vision. The solid vision is to create an ecosystem where your data is no longer centralized within the different applications, but actually under your own control. So no longer under the control of the existing big tech companies, but as a knowledge graph under the user's control. So the solid vision is to go to a world where your data and your applications are split from each other and actually live decentralized. So you can have a social feed application that works with your own calendar, your own address book, but you can also have a meeting scheduler app that also works with the calendar, also with the address book, and they can actually work with the same sets of data. And this solid vision would allow users to break free from their vendor locking. Now that sounds great, but if we then go into practice, how do we get there? Let's say we want to control your own personal contact book. To get into this solid ecosystem, to reclaim control over your personal data, you first need to get your data into its solid data storage first. So you start with your original address book, like Google Contacts. You might even find a tool that does the conversion for you. But then you realize that your contact information is scattered across your Office account, Facebook account, LinkedIn, etc., etc. And you need to do the transformation again and again. And that's when the problems start. You have duplicated contacts, addresses that are formatted differently, data that is missing in one data set but not in the other. And it becomes almost impossible to move from the current ecosystem to a solid ecosystem using existing initiatives and keep your existing data. And why is that? Because the existing initiatives are typically hard-coded one-to-one transfer systems. So you basically move from one web service to another. And this means you actually need to implement different adapters. You have to do actual development time if you want to support different web services. And in the end, you basically just move your data from one service to the other. You keep the same level of control. So these existing initiatives lack the transparency and interoperability to really create a decentralized world. You end up not knowing how your personal data is processed, and you end up in a similar situation as before. So the problem is not actually how to migrate your existing data, because then you just move your data around. The problem is how to integrate your existing data. Have a system that is just as easy to set up when you're integrating one data source or 100 data sources. And given we're talking about personal data, we need a system that is fully transparent, so we know exactly what happens with our personal data. So if you like to have total control over your digital profile data, that is why we have worked on the PROV4ITDATA project, a flexible tool for transparent transfer of personal data to personal data stores. So what is PROV4ITDATA? It's a data processing platform to integrate any data source into a personal data space. So your LinkedIn information, your Facebook, your Google contacts, but also your Imager, Flickr, pictures, all of them can go through the same platform. And the PROV4ITDATA platform does all the heavy lifting. So managing all the authentication, setting up the infrastructure to extract and transform your personal data. All of that is handled by PROV4ITDATA. The only thing you need to do as an end user is choose which data parts you want to integrate. How you can actually choose which data parts you integrate is actually a way is configured using RML.io. RML.io is an extension on top of a W3C standard, R2RML, and actually also going into a standardization track. And this allows you to really create presets. So extensible and reusable configurations that allows you to make a very customizable and transparent pipeline. So you can really configure, these are the data fields I want to use from my LinkedIn page, from my Facebook page, from my Google contacts, and you can, up to the finest detail, shape how you want your data to look like and where it goes to. And because everything is described in this kind of configuration, it's also 100% transparent. You can do automatic assessment, validation of the platform. So you don't actually have to move any data around to actually see how it works. And this is, as far as we know, quite unique in the current data portability landscape. And on top of the PROV4ITDATA platform is a demonstrator, which provides like a one-click solution to reclaim control over your personal data. So you just select one of the presets and the PROV4ITDATA framework moves your data around in an interoperable format. The system itself is built on open source and open standards. We use open source software because if actual development would be needed, it's actually easier to create customizations. It also increases the transparency of the platform itself. The source code as well is available. And we built on mature libraries such as RML.io and Comunica. And all of the data that is generated is using open standards for increased interoperability. So we make use of semantic web knowledge graphs and the RDF model to create the integration model for your personal data. And as said, we push it into the solid ecosystem to have personal data spaces with full personal access control. So as you can see, the PROV4ITDATA platform is quite a technical one. So who is it for? It's actually for knowledge scientists to create these kinds of presets, best practice data transfer configurations, and actually to integrate it into existing personal data applications or use it as a preprocessor for personal data applications. Because these configured PROV4ITDATA setups let users easily transfer their data for any use case. I also think that this whole for any use case is kind of the unique selling proposition of PROV4ITDATA. By making use of these fine-grained configurations instead of implementations, we can really provide a lot of flexibility in data sources, making it also very cheap to integrate new sources and have a lot of control and transparency over your data integration needs. And finally, the platform itself, you can see it as a kind of extract, transform, load platform. So you basically move the data around, but you could also see it as a synchronization platform. So you can keep using your existing services, but in the meantime, also bootstrapping solid applications. So if I can kind of conclude of what we were able to do in DAPSI is that we were really able to bootstrap this kind of platform. So we could improve the technology readiness levels of the core technical platform and improve functionality of the open source libraries or components we have been working on. So RML.io and Comunica, and integrated solid and create the demonstrator. In the future, we're currently working into expanding the platform to really create an integration platform as a service built on top of this open core that we have been bootstrapping within the DAPSI project. And our vision is to look beyond personal data. As said, the platform is use case independent, so we want to expand applicability to any kind of use case, not just personal data, but for example, Gaia-X, any kind of application to increase value. Thank you.